So you want to make $1 million. All you have to do is set up your Amazon store today, buy 3 Bitcoin, start dropshipping, and buy my course for $999,999 plus a $1 shipping fee. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week. The funny thing is, I bet you actually saw one of these types of courses in the advert before this video, because the internet truly is just filled with so much rubbish today. So in this video, I want to share with you 10 legitimate steps that you can take to speed up the process to making $1 million. I'm not here to sell you anything, and I'll tell you straight away that it won't happen overnight or without some hard work, but there are certain steps you can take which will simply speed up the process as you simultaneously work hard. Many of these steps I'm actually currently taking myself. So let's get straight into it. This is based on a great article I was reading on Good Financial Sense. The link is going to be in the description. So the first step is to choose the right career path. If you want to become a millionaire, the career path that you choose is going to be a big factor for how much you're able to save up. So we can see a few career paths shown here with the highest paying at the top. As we can see, a petroleum engineer makes an average salary of $154,000 per year. An IT manager makes $149,000, a marketing manager makes $145,000, and following on from these, we have financial managers, lawyers, sales managers, financial advisors, and more that you can see on the screen now. This is where I would add something to this article. I think the high-paying jobs are great, and they will certainly get you to being a millionaire more quickly if that's your goal. But I would say even more important than this is to learn high-paying skills. You see, the world that we are in is changing extremely quickly. And while there are definitely certain jobs which will be around in 30 years, I think it's more difficult today than ever to build a lifelong career path. But while that may actually sound quite scary on the surface, it's not a bad thing, because firstly, we're all in this together, and if you focus on building a few important skills, you're actually always going to be ahead of the average person who's really focusing on careers instead of skills. So which skills should you focus on? Number 1, your communication skills. Number 2, your ability to sell. And if you really want to hone your skills, I think you can learn a programming language or learning to code. As the great Warren Buffett says on communication, the best way you can improve yourself is to learn to communicate better. Your results in life will be magnified if you can communicate better. When it comes to sales, if you've ever watched The Apprentice, you'll know that virtually every task is about sales, and often what they're selling is completely unrelated to the job at the end of the process, because the skill of being able to sell crosses over to just about every industry and will always be high paying. And of course, coding or programming goes without saying. As more and more of the world turns to automation, if you can learn to code, you'll be able to really shape our future and get paid pretty well for it too. Oh, and for the record, I can't code, I can't sell, and it's taken me years, literally about 3 or 4 years, to learn how to be able to finally somewhat communicate on camera, and I'm still not great at it. So don't worry if you're not there yet, it is a learning process for us all. Step number 2 is to invest early and often. This is so important. If you want to make enough money to someday retire, you have to get your money working for you, not the other way around. When most people earn money each month, first they spend what they have to on things like rent and bills. Second, they spend money on things that they want. And finally, they save whatever they have left after this. This is totally the wrong way round. If you want to become a millionaire before most people, you have to think differently to most people. Instead, when you get paid, you should spend your money on things you have to, like rent and bills, and at the same time, put at least 10% of your income into savings, and ideally, much more than 10% if possible too. Then, at the very end, you can spend however much is left on the things that you want. Once you start thinking of putting your money into savings as like a bill that you have to pay each and every month, your mindset is going to change and you'll find your savings growing rapidly over time. If you can grow your savings, that's amazing and it'll set you up for the future. But now it's time to think about investing that money. Because you see, while it feels safe to hold all of your money in cash, cash actually drops in value every year. So your savings are dropping in value too. Imagine it kind of like swimming. You saving up money as you swimming towards the finish line. If you keep all of your money in cash, which is dropping in value each and every year, you're kind of like swimming against the tide. It's gradually pushing you back over time. I mean, if you swim hard enough, you're still going to make it to that finish line, but instead, wouldn't you rather swim with the tide? That way, it will be less work and you'll make it there quicker. Well, swimming with the tide is when you invest your money. Now, your money will start making you money, and that's going to propel you forwards, just like the tide when you're swimming. The earlier you can start saving, the better too. This chart shows us 3 people who are all investing $200 per month. The only difference is when they started saving. Jack began at 25, Jill began at 35, and Joey at 45. By the time they're 65, Joey has $100,000 saved up. Jill has nearly $250,000, and Jack has over a whopping $500,000 saved up. So the lesson is, if you can start early, your money will compound over time and begin growing pretty quickly. In fact, if we look at Jack, he had over $500,000 at the end, but he actually only contributed $96,000 himself. And that means that over $400,000 came just from him compounding his investments. Don't forget this. It's okay to work for money, but if you don't get your money working for you as well, you'll forever have to work for money. Now, if you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, don't be disheartened by this. Obviously, it is better to start saving earlier on, but the amount that you can save is a big factor here too. If you can improve one of the skills we talked about before, communication, sales, or coding, or focus on the other 8 steps to come, you'll have a great chance to grow your income, which means putting more money away each month, and you'll be compounding more money in no time. Before we talk about step 3, I want to add that investing is very important, and we're going to talk about how to invest. But having some cash is a good idea too. You should really have at least 6 to 12 months in cash saved up as part of an emergency fund before you invest. It's only once you've saved this up that we really want to start focusing on investing. Just quickly, this video took quite a long time to put together, so if you wouldn't mind smashing the like button to help with the YouTube algorithm, that would be greatly appreciated. Now let's move on to step number 3, and this is actually how to invest. The article suggests to emphasize growth investments. As noted, the average annual rate of return on stocks has been right around 10% for the past 90 years. Now, once we adjust this for inflation, the number drops to around about 7% of stocks return every year, which is still a very high number. And if we use the rule of 72, we can calculate how long it takes for us to double our money by putting it into the stock market. So basically, the rule of 72 is you take the return per year and you divide it into that number. So if the rate of return is 7% after inflation, then it's going to be 72 divided by 7. And that gives us, obviously, just over 10. So it takes just over 10 years to double our money in the stock market. But the great thing with compounding is that this really stacks up over time. After 10 years, our money has doubled. But after 20 years, our money has increased by 4 times. And by 30 years, our money has grown to a whopping 8 times in value. And of course, this accounts for inflation too. So which investments are good then? Well, I want to keep this video simple, but I also don't want to oversimplify it to the point that it's basically wrong. I could say to buy an S&P 500 index like this one on the screen now. If you buy this, you're basically buying a small chunk of America's 500 largest companies, and that's a great place to start. But I do want you to understand it a bit better, which would, to be honest, take around 15 to 20 minutes to cover everything generally. So I've put together another video on how to invest well and create a good portfolio. I'll include a link in the description so you can check it out after you finish this, and I'll remind you at the end of this video to give it a watch. But let's move on to step number 4. Use your employer-sponsored retirement plan for all it's worth. Listen, this is a big one. In life, there's usually no such thing as a free lunch. So when you are offered an opportunity to essentially get a free lunch, you have to be smart and take it. In the UK, for example, we have something known as a lifetime ISA. You can put your money into it and the government will actually add an extra 25% for free, all the way up to an extra £1,000 per year, as long as you spend that money on either your first house or your retirement. Now, as someone who is saving up to hopefully be able to buy a place someday, I plan to prioritize maxing that out every single year until I get to that point. In America, you have employer-sponsored plans like 401k and 403b plans. You can contribute up to $19,000 per year or $25,000 if you're 50 or older. And under plan rules, there's no percentage of income limit. You can contribute the first $19,000 you earn to your plan. What's more, the contributions will be tax deductible, which means the government will be helping you fund your plan. On top of this, there's another benefit that makes employer-sponsored retirement plans a must-have, and that's employer matching contributions. If your employer will provide a 50% matching contribution on up to a 10% contribution by you, that will add an extra 5% to your plan each year. It will increase your total contributions from 10% to 15% each year. Needless to say, your plan will grow 50% faster. And here is the key line: an employer matching contribution is like getting free money, because that's what it is. Remember, if someone is offering you a free lunch and there is no trick to it, take it. Maximizing any legitimate government-backed schemes like this is a great way to get to $1 million quicker. If you're not from the US or the UK, search for a few schemes online. Many countries have great schemes that you can take advantage of. Step 5, buy a house. There's this idea that when you're renting, you're just paying off someone else's mortgage. Instead, why not buy the house? And then when you're making your monthly payments, you're also buying a little chunk of that house each month. Now, I do think that there are times that it makes more sense for people to rent. And I also think the idea of buying as many houses as possible, as quickly as possible, probably isn't the best idea ever. Do you remember 2008? Have you ever seen The Big Short? So there are times when buying a house doesn't necessarily make sense for some people, but most of the time, as long as you're staying well within your budget, I actually think it's a great idea. Not only does it mean you now own a property, you own an asset which could climb in value over time and historically usually does, but more importantly than that, it forces you to invest some of your money each and every month. You see, if you're paying rent, you might have a certain amount of money left over each month, and then you can either choose to invest it wisely or you can spend it on other things. While we all know that we should invest, we can all be guilty sometimes of splashing out instead of saving when a paycheck comes through. Whereas if you buy a house, assuming it's not an interest-only mortgage, then each month you'll be investing into something which could also climb in value. Now, I know some people like Robert Kiyosaki aren't a fan of owning his own house and actually describes it as a liability instead of an asset, but for the average person, as long as you don't take on too big a mortgage, being forced to invest by paying off the mortgage each and every month, I think is a very good thing. Step 6, start your own side hustle. Starting a side hustle is a great idea for a few reasons. Firstly, you can pursue your passion. There's a good chance that you're working a job at the moment that pays you, but that's pretty much it. You might not get any enjoyment or fulfillment out of it. It's just for a paycheck. Well, a side hustle is a great way to pursue whatever you're passionate about. And also, working on a side hustle allows you to earn some extra money on the side, which you can put towards growing your investment pot. Think about it like this for a second. There's two types of jobs that exist. Jobs that pay you per hour and jobs that don't pay you per hour. Jobs that pay you per hour are great for stability. You'll be able to pay your rent or mortgage each and every month. You'll always have money to pay your bills, etc. But there are only so many hours in the day. Now, of course, you can try to get paid more per hour, but it gets really difficult to make a big leap from your current earnings to another level. So you might end up making quite a fixed income per year. Whereas with jobs that don't pay you per hour, things like creating YouTube videos, writing a blog, etc., you have the potential to earn a lot more money because your income doesn't equal the number of hours that you work. But you also have a lot more risk. If you can earn a lot more money, well, you can also earn a lot less money. So if you think about it for a second, the best way to make sure that you're safe is to work a regular job. But the best way to try to get ahead in life is to work a non-hourly paid job. So if you want to build for the future, but you also want to pay your rent today, working a regular job and building a side hustle, again, on the side, is really the best of both worlds. You've got both the safety and the high future potential. Now, this actually ties really nicely in with step number 7, and that is parlaying your side hustle into a full-time business. If you're working a regular job and a side hustle at the time, I know what you're thinking, it can be really tiring. But if you can keep building it, you should find yourself at a point in the future where you might be able to leave your full-time job and focus solely on your side hustle. For me personally, I was at university studying for my master's degree, and at the same time I was earning money online doing matched betting, and I set up a blog which ultimately sparked this YouTube channel, which has been, thankfully and incredibly, my full-time job ever since. So balancing university, making an income, and building a side hustle, to be honest with you, at times it was a lot of work. But if I'm also completely honest with you, In the years leading up to that, I was actually quite a lazy person. I was never motivated in school or university, and when it came to academic work, it just really wasn't what I was interested in, and I never tried as hard as I should have, because it wasn't my passion. Well, funnily enough, ever since I found my passion, I've actually been working 10 times harder than I did back then, and somehow I feel like I work less, because the truth is I love it. So if you're thinking to yourself, I can't start a side hustle and turn it into my full-time job one day because I don't have the energy when I get home from a long day of work, I completely understand. I really, really do. I know it's tough, but give it a go for at least a few months. You might actually find that you have more energy and motivation even though you're working harder. And I know that sounds totally counterintuitive, but that's what happens when you work on something that you love and you're passionate about. Step 8 is to become friends with other millionaires. It's been said that we're all the averages of our 5 closest friends. So I think there's 2 sides to this. It definitely is true that if you surround yourself with people you aspire to be more like, in this instance, people who are successful, then you are going to find it easier to create success in your own life. But there's a lot of people online who really recommend you take this to the extreme and cut out anyone in your life unless they are basically the most successful, optimistic person alive. Whereas, I don't agree with that. I think it's healthy to have a balance in your life. For me, for example, some of my friends are very ambitious, others aren't as much, and they're still my friends. My girlfriend, for example, is someone who is all about safety and wants a steady paycheck, whereas I'm much more of an entrepreneur. That's another way of saying a big risk taker. So we're really opposites in that sense, but she's also the most supportive person in my life, and that's much more important than anything else. So this idea of becoming friends with other millionaires, well, it could work, but I would say much more important than that is to simply surround yourself with supportive people who want what's best for you. Step 9 is to avoid lifestyle inflation. Like I said earlier, the way to become a millionaire is to get your money working for you, which means saving up and investing. Well, the more you spend, the less you save. The more you think about keeping up with the Joneses, the longer it will take to become a millionaire. And here's a great practical strategy that I use. Try to live each year better than the last, but still well below your means. So let's say, for example, you make $30,000 per year. Well, pretend that you only make $25,000 per year. After 3 years, now you're making, say, $40,000. Live as if you're making $30,000. 3 more years and you're making $50,000, but you're still living as if you're making a bit more at $35,000. You see, because you're spending more money each year, you won't actually feel like you're holding back. You'll feel like you're getting wealthier. But because you're living well below your means, you'll actually be saving up at the same time. It's a great way to trick yourself into feeling like you're not really saving because you're spending more money each year, but at the same time your balance is growing. Step 10 is to stay out of debt. Debt is a horrible thing. Do you remember the analogy from earlier where saving up in cash instead of investing is like swimming against the tide? Well, if you're trying to save with expensive debt to pay off, it can sometimes feel like the tide just grew to a storm and you're just trying to swim hard enough to remain stationary. Now, as someone with pretty significant student debts, I know how you feel if you already have debt. If you don't have it, try to avoid it at all costs. Well, actually, to be fair, it's a bit more complex than that because there are some instances where debt is actually good. For example, if you buy a house, a mortgage is debt, but that mortgage is probably quite low interest and it helped you to buy something which could be very valuable someday. So this is an example of good debt. If you're not sure which is good debt and which is bad debt, ask yourself the question, will this debt get me closer to being a millionaire? Now, I think we all kind of instinctively know which is good and which is bad. If you want to buy a fancy car, for example, well, I'd recommend not buying a fancy car and investing that money instead. But if you really want to, at least save up and buy it outright. Don't pay off a car over the course of several years because that is very bad, expensive debt, which should be avoided at all costs. If you already have expensive debts, don't worry. Most people do. But the key thing is to try to pay it off before you do anything else. For example, if you owe $1,000 at an interest rate of, say, 20%, pay that off before you invest $1,000 in the stock market or anywhere else. If you can pay off a debt with a 20% interest rate, it's essentially the same as investing your money and receiving a 20% return per year on that money. That's very unlikely you're going to manage that from investments. Now, here's your reminder that I mentioned earlier. If you'd like to learn how to invest safely and smartly, check out this video up here. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe for at least 2 new videos just like this each and every week. And of course, thank you for watching.